Welcome to the Empowered Mind podcast with Joelle and Natalie Rivera. We are on a never-ending quest to master the power of our mind, develop a growth mindset, and explore the leading edge of positive psychology and human potential so we can take radical personal responsibility for creating our destinies and reaching our potential. So let me ask you, are you asking yourself the right questions? Because if not, there's a good possibility you're not getting good answers and you're not getting solutions to your problems. Because the results that we get in life all come down to the questions that we're regularly asking ourselves. And the solutions to our problems come from asking the right question.
And even like Elon Musk and Albert Einstein and people like that always said that really, it's not about focusing on the problem. What happens to a lot of people is that they focus on a challenge or problem that they have in their life, and they keep trying to beat it and trying to ask the same question, and they can't come up with an answer of how they would solve that problem. And like Elon Musk says, a lot of times for him, it's coming up with different questions, and those questions then lead to new solutions. Albert Einstein also said the same thing, that he would sit back and actually step away from it and look at the questions he was asking himself to be able to come up with new ideas and new solutions that would help him really change their lives. And one of the first aspects of it is looking at, are you being specific enough with your questions?
Because if you're not, so for instance, you might say, I want to know, how can I make more money? Well, that's not a bad question, but the problem is, what do you mean by that? Because if you say, how can I make more money? It's like, what? Do you mean like, I want to make $1? Or do you mean I want to make $100? Or are you talking about a one-time thing? Or are you looking for long-term income? So what exactly does that mean? It's just not specific enough. And how are you supposed to get an answer that's going to be helpful if your question isn't clear?
Yeah, and that's the way the brain works. The brain needs specific things that it can focus on to really find solutions. Even in a relationship, you might be in a relationship, I say, well, how can I improve this relationship? I want to make this relationship better. And you're focused on how you can improve in it. But again, it's not telling the brain to focus on ways that it can actually improve it. So what are you trying to improve with it? Are you trying to improve communication? And if communication, what aspect of that communication? It could be intimacy. Are you trying to improve intimacy? And what aspects of that in your relationship do you want to change? So the more specific that you are, the more clarity you'll have, and the easier it will be for your brain to really be able to move forward and find a solution that's going to help you long term.
And so here's another example. You might be asking yourself, like, how can I get a better job? How can I, find something that I like better? But the problem is like, okay, so what does it mean to be better? What would make it better? And only by asking the more specific question, getting really clear. Like, say, for instance, you said, you really wanted a job that paid better. Well, at least that's a little bit more specific. You might want to kind of quantify, okay, well, how much do you want to make? And then ask yourself, okay, so how can I find a job that's going to pay me this much? That's a much more specific question. But you also might be thinking, like, how a better job might be having a better boss, because maybe you really don't like your boss. But again, like, that's a little more specific, but then you really got to look at what about your boss specifically would make it better. And then that opens up to the deeper question, which is it really a problem with your boss? Is there something else you could do to like the job that you have now more, versus feeling like the only solution is a new job?
Yeah, and that's part of the next step in asking the right questions is, one, you have to be obviously specific, which we kind of took a look at. The other is asking the right specific question. So for example, when you say, I want to change this person, how can I change this person in my relationship? How can I change my boss? You're not asking the right question a lot of times, because a lot of it is not up to you to change someone else. They're going to have to want to change. So it might be another question that might say, how can I change my perspective of the situation? Or how can I change the way I react to the situation? How can I reframe it to see it differently? So sometimes by the way that we ask it, we find different solutions to the same problem that we have, and we have less resistance to actually creating change. Because sometimes the questions that we ask, if they're not right, we're not actually empowering ourselves to do anything. We're just blaming someone else or blaming the situation with our question, instead of taking ownership and being able to actually do something about it.
And really, we've all heard the phrase that if you keep doing the same thing over and over again and expecting to get different results, then that's the definition of insanity. But I would say that it really works the same way with questions. If you keep asking the same question and going out at a problem in the same way over and over again and expecting a different answer, then that's also insanity. So the point here is to change the way that you're asking questions. If you're not getting a good answer, if it's not clear, if it's not coming, if it's not working, then take a step back and think, what other question could I ask? What other perspective could I take? And we've had this happen in our own lives and our own business many, many times.
Yep. And one of the examples, as far as business goes, is that we were asking a questions like, how can we work with school systems? And we were rocking our brain trying to figure it out. And the doors kept closing. And we started really reflecting on what we really wanted. And it wasn't about working with the school systems. It was about working with the population within the school system. So once we started asking the right questions, how can we work with teenagers and parents? Then we got the right question, because then we had all these different opportunities of ways that we could do that. And what ended up happening was that we started working with organizations, whether it was churches, nonprofits, other teen centers, and different things that connected us to that population, which eventually led us to working with the school system. But it wasn't, if we would have stayed focused on how can we work with the school system, it would have really limited us into getting to the population we wanted to and really helping the people we wanted to at the time.
So the challenge would be identify what questions are you trying to answer in your life right now? And then ask yourself, is there a different way I can ask this question that might get me a better result?
Yeah. And a lot of times it doesn't have to be making it this complicated thing. Like some simple thing changes that you ask in your question. For example, we got more clarity on the population we want to work with. Again, or when it comes to changing someone else, just a simple question is, how can I reframe or change the way that I see the situation? Again, it tells your unconscious mind that there's a different way of looking at it. It tells your unconscious mind that there's something else that you could do to come up with that answer. And once you do that, it triggers a whole new way of seeing life, and it triggers a whole new way of finding solutions to the same problems that you have.
Thank you, fellow Freedom Junkies, for listening. If you haven't already, be sure to subscribe. And if you want to help us grow, please rate and share this podcast. You can also become a member of Freedom Nation. Visit freedomorbustpodcast.com and sign up to receive access to exclusive content and take the 21-day happiness challenge. As you know, we believe that entrepreneurship is the ultimate form of empowerment, which is why we created the Side Hustle Business Startup course for anyone looking to create their own income and take back their power. We offer an exclusive discount for our podcast listeners. Find out more at freedomorbustpodcast.com.